There we go. And whoever jumps in, I'll be sure to add them, like I am now seeing popping in. But I do want to thank y'all. It is 2022, and it is crazy to think about. It's already the new year. I feel like just yesterday was pretty much summer, and I was like, yeah, planning for next year, and then Christmas came, and it still hasn't like really connected. It's a completely new year. But with New Year's, always comes New Year's resolutions. I don't really like to use the word resolutions because I never keep them. And so I usually just try to go for new goals, like resetting myself. What am I want to do this year? Kind of maybe start some new habits. What do I want to try to accomplish? And I'm a post-it note girl. And so I put post-it notes a little bit of everywhere to make sure I'm staying motivated. So whenever, especially if I'm in a slump or whenever you kind of hit those low periods, those dragging periods, challenging periods, I have reminders of what I wanted to accomplish for the year or what I'm working towards. Especially if you're trying to change habits, changing habits can be really, really difficult. And I think what do they say? It takes about 3 months before a habit even becomes a habit. So it's 3 months of pain and trying to remember and force yourself to do something before it becomes kind of second instinct, or a habit. So the same thing is true for land, except land is even longer term. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint, but we have to chop it up in bite-sized pieces. Otherwise, your land ownership and management responsibilities will seem so overwhelming. You won't know where to start. You'll feel scatterbrained, and you might start if it's like me cleaning the house. You'll start with cleaning the bathrooms, and then you come across the duster, and you're like, oh yeah, the blinds need to be dusted, so I might as well do that before I forget. So you start dusting the blinds, and then you come across your kids' crayons on the floor, and you're like, oh yeah, I need to pick those up. So you're putting the crayons on the floor, and then you find a cup. You're like, oh yeah, I gotta do dishes. And next thing you know, you only like got a quarter of the cleaning done, and yet you've been working for 6 hours and nothing looks clean or is even effectively clean. So same thing can be true for your land management. If you don't kind of take it in bite-sized pieces and look at what do you want to focus on for that year. I like to bring it in more like year aspects because land management is such a longer term. You don't really look at it, week by week necessarily. And month by month, you can look at it depending on what your goals and objectives are, if you live on there or not. So that is plausible, but definitely year by year. And so we own 43 acres behind our house. We're new landowners. And so everything I preach, I'm bringing into practice myself. So what I wanted to talk to y'all today about are the 5 steps that you can take this year to set yourself up for success. And I do want to add a networking opportunity for y'all, but we're going to do that at the end. And so I kind of have this presentation. I want y'all to feel free to interrupt and ask your questions if you want to do it over mic, or you can do it over chat. I got my awesome new communications director coming on board, Ms. Vic. She's on camera. So hi, Vic. And so she's going to help me monitor the chat box as well and make sure I don't miss any of your questions. So I did want to share some stats with y'all on information y'all provided me. So you registered for this webinar. You're watching it now. You're watching it recorded. And I just wanted to share some information that I got from y'all. One, I asked all of this because it's good for me to know where y'all are coming from. So we have folks mostly Georgia, which makes sense. I'm in Georgia. Most of my advertising is in Georgia, but we have folks coming in from Louisiana, South Carolina, Alabama, Texas, Wisconsin, and Indiana, and Mississippi. So we pretty much have a sprinkle of a little bit of everywhere. 19 of 32, this is before some more of y'all registered, said you have inherited property. So over half of y'all received your property through inheritance means. Now, I asked, what is y'all's biggest struggle as landowners? And I asked this because it helps me make sure I'm providing the right type of information to you. Since I am a registered forester, some things may be commonplace for me, or, I'm just like, oh yeah, everybody knows that. And then it comes to find out not everybody knows that. And so it is really important for me to always hear from y'all on what are your struggles, what do you want more information about? But at least 8 of y'all, 8 out of 32 of y'all, so the majority of y'all, these were the most common words. You wanted to know, your biggest struggle was you didn't know what to do. You used words like what steps to take. I'm just trying to figure things out. Literally, I saw those phrases in some form or another at least 8 times. So over a quarter of y'all are just trying to figure out what to do. The rest of the words that were used on your biggest struggles, the next most common one was just, trying to make management decisions, or long-term management, putting it to maximal use. And then there's, of course, is reforestation and selling timber, long-term distance, estate planning, taxes. Those were all words that were used. But the majority of y'all, just don't know what steps and what order to kind of put things in. The good news is there is no right or wrong necessarily order. There's general timelines, but there's not necessarily a right or wrong order. So that should hopefully bring you some comfort. Your priorities for your objectives was kind of as expected. The majority of y'all, about half of y'all, said timber and income. Now, I don't know if y'all just put timber and income because I think it was the primary option or not. The next most popular was wildlife, and then the next was wildlife and aesthetics personal was pretty split evenly. And then what did y'all want the most information on? It was a nice, lovely, even spread between, income streams. How do you kind of figure out that periodic income? Then taxes, everybody always has questions on taxes. Estate planning was really, really popular, real estate, buying real estate, and then another factor, and the range of acres. So I wanted to know, what size landowner am I dealing with? And our range of acres we have folks that don't own land yet, but are buying their first piece of property, as was shared in these comments, to people that own 40,000 acres and inherit it. So the average, is a little over 1,000 to 2,000 acres. But I do have folks, again, that don't own property, that just have 3 to 5 acres. A lot of 1,000 to 1,500 acres, and then the 40,000 acres. And so I wanted to share that because there are a lot of common struggles, a lot of common challenges, no matter what type of landowner you are, whether you're a veteran landowner, whether you are a complete newbie, whether you just inherited, whether you're looking to buy property for the first time, whether you have 5 acres, whether you have 1,500 acres. You all have these kind of common emotions when it comes with your property, especially if it's something new and you just inherited it. So we're going to go ahead and get started, because you're probably like, this isn't what I came here to talk about. That's cool, but I want to figure out how to become a more successful landowner. All right, share. So we are going to focus on just five steps that you can do, that you can apply. You may already have done some of these, or you may not have considered it. So if you've already done it, it'll be great. It'll be a great refresher for you. 1, we're going to talk about reviewing your plan. 2, establishing farm records. 3, waterproof field boots. Oh my goodness. You have no idea how much this will change your life if you already don't have waterproof field boots. And we'll go into it in a second. 4, property tax reduction. So we will be touching base on taxes, because what are the 3 most common things, or certain things about life? You'll be born, you'll die, and taxes, something like that. I don't know. There's a better phrase about it, but basically taxes are a part of life that we can't get away from. And 5, what I'm calling a land asset compilation. So that ties a little bit into estate planning, but I'll share a little bit more about that in a second. So 1, review your plan. All right, review. Okay, first off, you should have a management plan. If you don't have a management plan, get a management plan. So this is kind of under the assumption that you already have some sort of management plan in place, whether it was a brief management plan, a stewardship plan. And if you're like, Danielle, I don't know the difference between the two. A brief management plan is simply a plan written by a professional, a resource professional, a forester, a wildlife biologist, an NRCS agent, someone that has the education and the experience to legally provide you advice on timber and forest lands. I say legally because depending on the state you're in, it may be legally required for them to have a certain registration or license for them to be able to give you that type of advice. In Georgia, a forester must be a registered forester to legally provide advice to a landowner. Not every forester will be registered, like the foresters underneath big name companies that only work on their property. They don't necessarily need registration, but if a consultant forester or someone that is like sharing advice with you outside of the Georgia Forestry Commission, because they kind of have an umbrella coverage, legally is supposed to have a license to do so. It's kind of like being a lawyer. They want to make sure they have the proper education and experience qualifications before telling you what to do with your 20 to 30-year long-term investment. No, stewardship plan is a 10-year management plan that takes everything into consideration of your goals, your objectives, and all of your tracks, all of your stands, and provides you advice of what you can do based on what you shared with them for the next 10 years. So that being said, review your plan and see if there was anything that needed to be done last year that just simply didn't happen, either because of personal situations with health and sickness, or maybe you are away too much, or time just simply got away from you and you didn't do what you needed to get done, or weather. So what may that be? That could be as simple as we meant to do our thinning last year and we didn't thin. Weather was a big factor, and again, life just got in the way. Next thing you know, it was December and you never got around to actually thinning your timber or reaching out to that forester to conduct that timber sale. Maybe you meant to put in fire breaks to kind of get ready and prep for prescribed burn, or just put in fire breaks to help with your boundary maintenance. And again, it just never happened. It got put on that back burner. So many practices, especially if you don't live on site of your property, can be put on the back burner. So review, see what was not accomplished that you were supposed to have done last year. And that's one of the first things you need to kind of assess and say, do I need to do this still? Is this like a forest health priority? Thinning, for example, would be considered it's a great income stream, but you're thinning really to kind of improve the forest health and improve the crop trees you want for those better products. And so you have like a 2, 3, maybe a 4-year window to do your thinning. If you do it out of then, you're really putting your forest land at risk of beetles and other diseases and forest health problems that might cause you to lose all of your trees. So is it a forest health risk if you don't get it accomplished this year? If so, that's a priority. You need to make sure you get that done. Or is it more of a luxury, like putting fire breaks around your property boundaries? That's awesome. It makes property boundary maintenance so much easier, but that's not necessarily a forest health risk. So just as a comparison. Determine what goals and practices you want and need to get accomplished this year. So this is a little bit like what I said, reviewing what you had not done that needed to get done last year, and does it still need to happen this year? Again, comparing that forest health risk, water quality risk, compared to more of a luxury that is just something that would make you personally a lot more happy. But what else do you need to get done? So maybe you had planning for brush management and herbicide work to kind of get ready for hunting season this year. You would look at, okay, what areas do I need to call and get a mulcher? When do I need to call them? If I'm doing herbicide work, when does the herbicide contractor need to come out to look at it? And then herbicide usually has a small window that you want to actually spray depending on what vegetation you have. And so you need to kind of, be thinking ahead of time so you make sure you don't miss that. For example, oust controls your more of your grassy forbs, and kind of do that right after your trees are planted. You spray it right over your trees, and that needs to be done around March and April. So if you're not thinking about it, next thing you know, it'll be March. You try to call that chemical contractor to spray over your trees, and he's already booked up and you've missed that. And so you've missed that window to maximize your crop trees that you just invested all this money in. Compared if you're doing a site prep spray, that's usually late summer. So you do have some time, but you want to kind of get thinking and prioritizing when things need to get done this year. And so you don't let life kind of slip by again. And next thing you know, you wanted to get this done next week. It's likely not going to happen. Most contractors, a lot of foresters get booked up really far in advance. So if you want to get on their schedule, especially if you're a small landowner, and small landowner in the terms of the forestry world is anyone with 40 acres or less. Anyone that has less than 40 acres, you're considered small because you typically don't have enough acreage and volume to allow the contractors to break even, to come to you on your schedule. If you have more than that, you have a little bit more flexibility because you have enough area for them to spend a lot of time on your property, and it makes it a little bit more profitable for them, especially with gas and oil prices the way they are. Get on their schedule early. So what do you want to get accomplished this year? What adjustments might need to be made to better fit your situation now? Maybe you're moving, and so you want to do your thinning earlier. Maybe you want to prep up for a hunting situation. Your grandkids are going to be coming for the holidays this year, and so you need to get some stuff done this summer to prepare your property for the fall hunting season for opening day. Or maybe there's some health things that are not allowing you to go out to your property as often, especially with COVID hitting up some folks pretty hard. Maybe you're like, you know what, I'm just not going to worry about doing these fire breaks. I'm not going to worry about doing the food plots this year. It's just, we're going to let this go. I'm not going to plan to do that. That's just going to add more stress. So make some adjustments based on your health situation, your distance, and kind of your new priorities or goals for you and your family. So if you have a consultant forester already, this is when you would also reach out to them and discuss the amendments and goals and needs for this year. So if you have those larger acreages, those 100 plus, few hundred plus, especially if you have 1,000 plus, maybe you already have a consultant that is managing your property pretty regularly for you. And if this is the case, I definitely want you to take the time on your own to review your plan, kind of figure out what happened, what didn't happen. And that way you stay engaged and it's kind of on the forefront of your mind. So when you call him, you'll have a better discussion with what you want to get done with your goals. Because a consultant forester's job is to provide you the recommendations, but ultimately it's to provide you recommendations that meet your goals. And if you don't know what you want out of your property, he's going to be providing you recommendations that may or may not have you satisfied in the long term. If it's to maximize profit and you say, I want to keep my trees out there forever, he's gonna be like, well, that's not really maximizing, your profit income stream necessarily. But we can do that, and he can make recommendations, around that concept. So talk with him about what didn't get done. What are the plans for this year? What does he think is plausible? If you have a really wet site and it's going to be a really wet summer, what are some of the priority things you need to keep an eye out, or what do we need to keep, on the ready? So whenever it does dry out, he can move in and take action. If you don't have a consultant forester that you already have that relationship with, or you have those smaller acreages, reach out to one, or you can also reach out to your county foresters to have them kind of make some brief management plans for you and discuss some of the practices that you think would be beneficial for your property. In Georgia, and I think for a lot of the states, I'm not going to guarantee all the states, but I know at least for Georgia, all forestry advice from the county foresters is completely free. You can call them up and say, hey, I want you to evaluate my property for thinning. And they'll come out there and they can't tell you how much it's worth. They can't tell you how much volume's out there, but what they can say is, yes, you want to look at thinning this year, thin down to a basal area of 65, do a 4th row plus selection thinning. And this would be pretty much something you could pick up and hand to that consultant forester who would conduct the timber sale. So if you have those smaller acreages, that's just not profitable for that consultant to stay on and manage because it is so small. And by so small, again, I just mean 40 acres and less. But maybe you do have a relationship with him because he's helped you with your brush management. Either way, you can call consultants and they can help write these brief little management plans for you. They can write these long-term plans for you, but this whole purpose is just to figure out what you need to do this year. And they can also kind of be that sounding board that if you want to possibly get something done because you've heard about it, you want more information about it, like carbon market. Should I apply to the carbon market program this year based on what I have out there? And they can have that discussion with you. Maybe you have a stream that has a culvert that's blown out and you need roads that are rehab. They can provide you that advice of how should I go about doing this work while maintaining clean water. And so if you have a plan, call one of them to help you make those professional amendments. And if you don't have a plan, call one of them to help you get a plan. So, and y'all are going to be getting some PDFs of this. So what I've done for y'all is just kind of make a quick little sheet. And this is just a personal plan sheet. And you're going to get this as a PDF. I'll shoot it in the chat box. Probably after this presentation, and it'll also be in the Facebook group, and I'm going to email it out to y'all. And you can print this off and, just write some dates that you want to do some things by. This isn't going to be necessarily today's date, but you can write like by March, I want to have a county forester go out and do a site visit for my property, and I would call, and your professional contact would be the Georgia Forestry Commission. Or maybe it's I need to get some herbicide spraying done. So you say by February, I'm going to contact my contractor. Practice goal would be to discuss herbicides for my 3-year-old longleaf, for my 25-year-old / pine plantation, for whatever it is, and then put the professional contact of who it is you're aiming to reach out to. So I love Post-it notes, but I also love tables. They help keep me organized. Just a 1-page sheet. So that way you can look at this for the entire year, and hopefully it'll keep you a little bit more organized and on top of it, instead of having a brief management plan over here, brief management plan over there that don't overlap on the same page. This will kind of connect, maybe if you have a ton of different plans going about everywhere, or if you have a lot of acreages where you have a ton of different things going on. You have a food plot, on stand A, you have a timber harvest over across the river, you got to rehab your roads over by the home site. So if you have a lot of different things, having them on one piece of paper, on one table for the year only is really helpful to keeping your thoughts organized and make you feel like you're staying motivated. So the second thing you need to do this year, if you haven't already, is establish your farm records. All right. So call, email, go to the local office, although I think because of COVID, you may have to make an appointment these days. Go to your local FSA, your Farm Service Agency office, to have your farm records established. If you don't know how to find your local FSA office, I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So I'm going to add this link to the chat box. It's USDA Service Center Locator. You can just Google that as well. Let's open that up. And it'll bring you to this lovely little website. All right. And you look for the state you're in. Georgia's split in two since it's a pretty big state, and I'm in South Georgia. So we're going to go to the Southern Georgia, and it pulls up all the fun little counties. All right. You just go and click on your county, and I'm in Glenn. So we're going to click on Glenn. And then it pulls up your, this is for NRCS. Hang on. All right. So it pulls up your NRCS office. It used to have all of them. Not very messed up. There we go. Come on. There we go. So if you need FSA, you click FSA, and then you go to that other thing, and basically the same thing. You're going to click on your county. And now you see it says Farm Service Agency. I'm in Glenn. And it shows you where the county office that serves your county is at. So for me in Glenn, my FSA office is actually in Jessup, which is Wayne County. And then here's some contact information. I could call their office. If I wanted to call someone directly, if I wanted a farm loan, I could talk to that. And there's some emails as well as the address to go there myself. So I will put this, well, y'all don't need that one. And again, I'm going to be sharing all of this on a PDF for y'all through email. So if you don't grab it, you don't have to fret about that. All right, so let's go back to the presentation. Now, if you have questions, where's my little mouse? There we go. Feel free to type them in the chat. Unmute yourself. I think there's like a little hand raised little feature thing. So if you want to be polite before you interrupt, I think you can click a little like emotion thing and it waves your hand virtually at me. Now, there are lots and lots of forms. And this is why I'm saying to do it as early as possible, because I applied for my first cost share this last fall, and I don't know, there was about a dozen different forms, and I had to call them. I was like, what does this mean? What am I verifying? Because of course the fine print on all the bottom of the forms is this is a federal government form. If you're lying, you can be persecuted. Not that they're going to persecute you for making an accidental mistake, but I always get super paranoid about federal government paperwork. So there's a lot of different things kind of verifying, yes, you own the property. Yes, I am who I say I am. Yes, I make less than $999,000 type of thing. And they put all that in their system. They set you up with a farm number. They set your tract up with a tract ID number. And this makes you eligible now to apply for cost share. So right after you establish your farm records, get connected with your local NRCS agent. And it's that website that I put in that chat box. And this is the agent that you're going to talk to about cost share programs. So the other most popular question I get besides how much is my timber worth is what cost share programs are available. Maybe you call it what grants are available, what financial assistance is out there to help me manage my trees, plant my trees, grow my trees. I've kind of heard all those different phrases. And your NRCS agent is who I'm going to send you to. And if you don't have farm records yet, they're going to immediately send you to FSA to get your farm records established. So that's why I'm saying just go get them done. You got to have it done before you do anything, before you're eligible for anything. And it's a lot of paperwork. It's a pain in the butt. It really is. So just get it done early and out of the way. And you only have to do it once. You don't have to do it year after year. And I'm pretty positive you only have to do it once for all of your properties within that state. I could be mistaken. So if you have a lot of different tracts, you have one farm ID number, and then you have a ton of different tract IDs associated with each tract. But then you can go to your NRCS, your Natural Resource Conservation Service agent, and you can let them know what your acreage is, how many acres you have, what land type, which makes a difference if you have like ag fields, if you have pine plantation or hardwoods. Something as simple as that. What type of land do you have? You have 10 acres, you have 50 acres. You share what your goals and objectives are long-term and for the year. So you can say, this year I want to plant food plots and renew my food plots, do some wildlife openings because my long-term goals are to increase wildlife habitat. That's just an example. If you can say something along those lines of what your short-term and long-term goals are, your agent, one, is probably going to give you a hug because they now know how to find which programs you might be eligible for and you should consider looking into and help you kind of phrase and be eligible for different things. So example, EQIP, Environmental Qualities Incentives Programs, has something ridiculous like 200 different practices that you can apply for reimbursement to do. The most popular is reforestation and planting trees. So if you go in and say, hey, I'm interested in EQIP, they're going to instantly think you probably want site prep for reforestation and planting trees. But if you go in and say, I have hardwoods and I want to improve the wildlife habitat, I'm thinking about doing some thinnings and food plots, hey, there's some EQIP money as well to apply for wildlife openings, food plot establishments, brush management, pollinator habitat. There's all these different practices that you can apply for to do that you probably were already planning on doing. So you might as well throw your hat in the ring and see if you get any financial assistance. Now, this is a really competitive program, so there's no guarantee you'll get it. But you know what? If it's possible, throw your hat in the ring, and it's really going to help your rate of return for your land investment in the long term. So farm records, they're going to really help you out. And if you get them done early, if you go in and go next week, start your farm records, get them completed by the end of the month, this is going to help make sure you don't miss any application deadlines just because you didn't have your farm records. So 9 times out of 10, most people hear about programs like the week before the applications are due. You can submit applications any point during the year, but there's usually a very active period, like a month active period that the NRCS office is actively taking applications. And so if you put it in February, you're already good. But then that is the pool of applications that will be for the funding for the next year. So for example, November 5th was the application period for EQIP for money for 2022, November 5th of 2020. So I went in, I think at the beginning of October, I got my farm records established. It literally took me like a month just between, work and scanning and emailing and doing it wrong anyways and having to redo it and send it back. And then I, talked to her over the phone and she got my EQIP application put in the system. But it took me that month to do it. And really like that last week, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit of a procrastinator sometimes. And so I got my final paperwork in that last week to get squeezed in. But I have a lot of folks that say November 3rd, hey, what programs are available? And I'll say, hey, this is open. You have 2 days to go. You should go right now. If they don't have farm records already established, you're probably going to miss that eligibility period. And it's going to be about 2 years before you are even eligible for funding. Because remember, that pool of money was for the next year, and you won't even find out if you got it until sometime in the spring, depending on how many delays the government has. All right, 3. So underappreciated, waterproof field boots. Now, if you're a long distance landowner, I still recommend doing this because at some point, in the year or in the years, you're going to visit your property, or you should visit your property. And you're going to wish you had these, because I've walked a lot of property lines and properties with long distance landowners that go out in sneakers, and sneakers are great, but your feet are going to get wet, they're going to get dirty, they're going to get muddy, and it's just a less than pleasant experience. So just go ahead and get some field boots. And if you're getting field boots, get waterproof boots. So depending on the type of land and terrain you're at, if you're in mountains versus down here in the swamps, will kind of gear you towards what type of boots you might really be needing and wanting. But I recommend something with ankle support. I like having something that's lace up over slip-ons when I'm in the woods, because if you accidentally roll your ankle when you have those lace up boots, it just provides you a little bit more support if you accidentally stumble in a hole, trip on a root, trip on a log or a stem, or trip on air, whatever it is. That ankle support is just going to be a lot better with lace ups versus slip-ons. Now, I do woods in both. It really just depends on how much walking I'm going to be doing, and if I can find my other boots or not. So if you have slip-ons, that's perfectly fine. They're really easy. They're good to keep in the truck too. But I do usually recommend lace ups. They're just going to give you that much more support. Do not get steel or composite toe shoes. They're just going to make your shoes heavier, especially if you're not out there that long, but you have this inspiration. I want to walk all of my property lines, and I want to walk in the woods and enjoy the songbirds. The steel toe and the composite toes. That's when your toe is hardened and protected. It's really for like mill and machine work, or like factory type of situations. It can be handy in the woods, but honestly, it's just causing you to have heavier shoes to have to lift up and be a lot harder on your ankles, which we just talked about supporting. And so you don't necessarily, need to get those. The height of the boots, you can do something as like, they have hiking boots that are more like sneakers that are just under the ankles. You can do that. Again, I prefer something just over ankles that gives you a little bit more of that stability. And then there's boots that go almost all the way up to your knee. Now, the taller the boot, the heavier it's going to be. But this is when you kind of look at your land type and your terrain. Are snakes an issue? Down here in South Georgia, it might, if you're out there a lot, it definitely might not be bad to have a pair of snake boots. And those are going to be tall boots that go up at least mid calf, probably closer to your knee. Those are going to be lace ups as well. Do you have high standing water? Do you need something more like muck boots, those slip on muck boots that are waterproof up to your knee? Because you're going to be tromping around in the swampy type waters. Or do you have lots of briars and thorny bushes and vines that you're kind of wanting to protect your calves at? That might all like warrant getting taller knee-like boots. If you're just out there occasionally, ankle coverage is probably enough. I did bring a little list of some, common boots just to give you an idea. So Ariat, I love Ariat. I usually wear Justin's as slip-ons, but Ariat has some pretty good lace-ups. So again, I recommend waterproof. And you're like, well, Danielle, I have dry land. Why do I need waterproof? Because if you're out there at 9 in the morning when the dew's still there, your waterproof or your non-waterproof shoes, your socks are going to get wet when you're out in that dewy grass and those dewy leaves and the dew's coming off all the trees. You're just going to be wet. So if you have waterproof shoes, you have dry socks, and dry socks equals dry feet, which make happy landowners if you're going to be out there for a while. So you see something like Skyline Mid waterproof. It's going to give you that ankle support, lace up, so you can bring it to your comfort level. And you can just pick what makes sense budget wise and comfort wise. So here's a pull on waterproof boot. So if you just wanted something to pull up, those work just as fine. Here's one that says composite toe, where I recommend not, because you don't need that extra weight 9 times out of 10. These are probably about average. You can easily find cheaper boots. So let's see what else I got for y'all. Columbia, they usually have some pretty good stuff. They have a lot of snow boots, which I don't know, maybe you might need some snow. I don't need snow boots ever, but maybe you do. But they have some right here, full grain leather hiking. A lot of times these type boots are going to be labeled as hiking boots. So that might be an easy way for you to kind of Google if you want more of like this look that covers just over your ankles. Google hiking boots instead of work boots, because if you Google women's work field boots, you're going to get a lot of steel toe. I checked that one out for you already. And so you can see something here is, I think that just barely covers the ankles. Price range, $50 to $150. So those are just some more examples. Keen, if you're a little bit more eco-friendly, or if you're on the younger generation that just loves the Keen sandals, they're Keen boots too. I don't know much about them. I just know a lot of folks that tend to be like naturalists like Keen sandals. So you might be interested in their Keen boots. They have sneaker-like boots that are waterproof, which could be really comfortable. They actually look really comfortable. To those ankle supporters right there. These are probably more sneaker-esque compared to Ariat, I would say. So they're probably, I'm not going to guarantee, I'm just guessing, they're probably on the lighter side, like weight-wise, which could be really helpful. And Magellan. So this is a super popular brand that you're going to see in places like Dick's and Academy Sports. This is when I talked about if you need high waters, these kind of muck boots might be really helpful. Or if you have a really wet site that tends to be mucky, those are great boots to wear out. If you're not walking super long distances. They make a lot of hunting gear that you can buy at Academy, but they have some other different kinds. A lot of fashion stuff. Don't just go for fashion. Again, make sure it says something like waterproof. And that it's more than waterproof than like these duck boots where they have this weird fabric on the ankle. That's only helpful in, the water puddles in the parking lot. Anyway, so I just wanted to give you some ideas of what type of field boots, because I've been asked like, well, what type of field boot should I get? And then your mind starts going crazy of thinking of like big, heavy work field boots. And it doesn't have to be that complicated. Just think about what is your budget? How often are you going to be going out there? And I, again, highly, highly, highly recommend waterproof. Your socks are going to thank you for it. All right. What I know y'all are probably at the edge of your seat waiting for: property tax. and specifically how to reduce your property taxes. Hopefully you've already done this. You may not have though. So get your property underneath a county tax conservation use agreement ASAP if it's not already. This can be huge savings depending on your state and county. There's my little disclaimer. But it can be up to almost 60% of reduced taxes compared to the current use. So if you are being taxed at the highest current use and you happen to be near a big city like Atlanta, Savannah, Augusta, something like that, but you have timberland, your timberland might be being taxed at that highest current use, which would be like development. But if you put it underneath something, a conservation use agreement with the county, you're reducing the taxes by saying, hey, I'm not developing it. I'm putting it in timberland, agriculture. I shouldn't be, taxed at development type rates. And that's going to reduce your taxes pretty substantially. If you're in a really, really rural area, think of Eccles County, Fargo, Georgia. The tax reduction may not be as significant because the chances of development in that area just isn't nearly as high, but it will still reduce your property taxes. Now, in other states, it has different names. So if you notice, I didn't put the name of this property tax reduction because depending on what state you're in, depends on what it's called. But if you just Google conservation use property tax reduction, you should pull up something for your state. And I'll try to get the links for y'all. I'm going to show y'all a link actually that it will be really helpful in just a minute. But in Georgia, it's called CUVA, C-U-V-A. But there's some other options for you. Now, this is for each county your tract is in. I do want to emphasize this. So if your tract falls on like a county border and it falls within 2 counties, you have to go to both the counties for this tax assessment because it is only for the county. You're making an agreement with that particular county. If you have multiple tracts in different parts of the states, you're going to have to go to each county tax assessors and get each tract underneath CUVA. If you have, if all your tracts are in one county, the great thing is you don't have to talk to one folks, but you still have to make sure each tract is under CUVA. Now, if your question is, I live on my land, is my home site considered, for this use agreement? The answer is going to be no. You will have to cut out the acreage of your actual homestead if you live out there from CUVA. And so it could be like, 2-3 acres, and maybe you're getting a 30-acre reduction. You only need, in Georgia at least, and in most of the states, you only need 10 acres minimum, and it's around a 1,500 acre max that you can enroll. But again, remember this is per county. So if they're in multiple counties, that number resets, if that makes sense. I will preface this and say I'm not a tax expert. I do bring in tax experts to talk about this more in depth. So if you have tax questions, I may not know the answer. And I'll probably say refer to your tax accountant or tax webinars. Sometimes proof is needed if you've never enrolled in this before to show that you are doing agriculture or forestry. And what we talked about, number one, that management plan is typically plenty enough proof for you to bring to the tax assessors to show like, hey, I'm doing forestry, this is long term, because what they want to make sure is that you're not going to get this tax reduction and then develop it next year. That you're not trying to like cheat the system. It's typically a 10-year covenant, which, hang on. There we go. So here is a awesome little table that the University of Georgia made up. So these are actually different types of property tax incentives. This is Georgia specific. I do believe the other states have something very similar. They just may be named something different. I'm pretty familiar with CUVA, the one in the middle left. I'm somewhat familiar with FLIPA. The ones on the outer edges, I'm not nearly as familiar with, so please don't ask me any questions on them. But pretty much we'll go through them very quickly. And what's important for you to understand is that you do have options. I always kind of talk about CUVA, but there are other options depending on your circumstance and your situation. And I would advise talking to a educated tax accountant and your tax assessors to figure out what might be best for you and your situation. So this is my disclaimer: to talk to a tax accountant that understands property taxes in regarding to timberland. So not just the, H&R Block guy. Like, they're probably not going to necessarily know. Talk to somebody that understands property taxes for timberland. And they can give you a lot better advice. And then talk to your tax assessors as well. Now your tax assessor is probably gonna be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've heard that 99,000 times. And the truth is, they may not know, because they might just be the front desk help. So you're gonna have to a lot of times bring that paperwork in, say, I want this property tax incentive. I want to enroll in this. And you might have to push for it a little bit, especially if they're either super busy or if they just don't care. You're really going to have to push for it. So ag preferential, this is a 10-year covenant. And now all of these are pretty much covenants, which means you are making a agreement with the county that you will not develop it, that you are saying everything is true, and that for the next 10 years, you will not do this. If you break it, you see they all have a penalty, and usually those penalties are like back taxes plus interest if you break the covenant. And that simply means if you enrolled in CUVA and you put 30 acres in it, and next thing you know, in 5 years, you decide you don't want the property anymore, and you are going to do a trailer park. So you cut all the trees down and you put out a trailer park or something like that, then you broke the covenant. Or if you build a 5,000 square foot house and you didn't tell them about that, that would be breaking the covenant. You can sell property that is underneath these different use assessments. You just, I think you have to do maybe an extra paperwork. You definitely have to express that this is there. There's some fine print in there about selling property underneath these assessments, but I believe you can do it, but I'll double check on that. So ag preferential, it's for agroforestry. So if you have ag fields, this might be a good option. There is no minimum acreage, so this could be good if you have really, really small acres, less than 10 acres. You can only enroll 2,000 acres. The assessment value is 75% of fair market value. You can't do any type of changes. So like looks like there's a zero tolerance. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. A zero tolerance penalty, that if you accidentally flip something, do some wildlife openings, develop a little shack or a pole barn or something, you could get penalized. That's about the extent I know about that one. CUVA, the most popular property tax incentive conservation use program for the average landowner. This is also for agriculture. So if you have ag fields, this is eligible. Typically 10 acres or more. It says you can do under 10, but it's a lot harder to prove when you have less than 10 acres that it is a true agriculture or forestry use, instead of just a big yard, if that makes sense. But you can only enroll as 2,000 acres. Now, I think this table is from a 2021 publishing or PDF publishing, which means it's 2020 rules. But I don't think any of these have any significant changes. So its assessment value is at its current use. So timberland, agriculture, compared to its max value use, which would be, again, if you live near a big city, the max value could be, or highest value use could be something for development and commercial properties. Here we go. You do have like a 3%, it looks like, change limit. So you have like a 3% window that you could kind of create some openings and you won't be jeopardized. It is a 10-year covenant again. And there is penalties if you break that covenant. And most of the counties, it's kind of just like a handshake thing. There's not this huge contract. I think you just sign maybe a piece of paperwork and your property taxes get reduced. Now there's FLIPA. This is good for or targeting more at those larger landowners. So I mentioned a lot of y'all have 15 to 40,000. Not a lot. Several of y'all have 15 plus thousand acres, 1,500 plus acres, up to 40,000 acres. So the minimum acreage you do have to enroll is 200 at a time, but there is no max for this. So if you have a lot of acreage, this could be your option. Again, it's assessed similarly to Cuba at its current use, which means it's being assessed at what it currently is, forestry, timberland, timber, not its potential for commercial development. You have a grace of 3%, no more that you can kind of, wiggle, and that is probably like, food plot openings and whatnot. It's again a 10-year covenant, and there is, of course, a penalty for that. And then I think this one's relatively new within the last 2 years. QTP. I don't remember what that stands for. I do remember, of course, it says it's for forestry. It's for at least 50 acres, but there's not a max acreage. Um, mm, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know what that assessment value means. But what I do remember about it and what a lot of folks were very interested in was the fact that it was an annual type of incentive and an annual certification, which means that if you're not really sure about your future for your land, if you're going to keep it, what you want to do with it, but you do know this year you're keeping it in trees, this might be the option for you. That it gives you a lot more of that flexibility. It doesn't commit you to 10 years keeping it in trees or agriculture. Excuse me. Um, but you're not going to get nearly as much of that reduction because of the fact that it is just based on an annual thing. And every year you will have to go in and renew your certification. So there's an awesome little website that's way smarter than me, timbertax.org. Let's click on that. And if you're here, and there's a lot of different tax information. There's federal income taxes, state taxes, severance taxes when you harvest your timber. But what we're talking about is property taxes. So they have webinars and they stay relatively updated. So I had found something. Go to state tax laws. Okay, so if you go state tax laws right over here, there's a property tax section. And if you wanted to kind of see, different tax systems in use, you can go to the quick reference. And this just tells you, what taxes you might have to be aware of. So in Georgia, we have property and then we have severance taxes. So my Alabama folks are the same. Let's see, who else did we have on here? Indiana, you got property, and then you have a flat tax. Okay, but that's all you got. Florida, Florida is just property. So that would be helpful to know what taxes are you responsible for. And then hang on, there was something where you could click on each state. Okay, so here you could click on your state and just kind of look at what the different tax incentives that we just talked about. So the preferential assessment, number 2 is CUVA, 3 is that FLIPA. And so you could, read about it a little bit more. This might be good for you to, or more in depth. So it's just a cool little website that I'm not going to spend a ton of time on. But if you do want to know a lot more or have something to bring to your tax accountant or to the tax assessor's office, this might be a really great website for you. Now, property taxes often is a killer for a lot of landowners if you don't have it underneath some type of conservation use. So this can be huge in reducing your property from being a liability and making it an asset for you and your family. Especially if something was to happen to you, if it's under CUVA, make sure your kids know about it, first of all. But, it's just going to take a lot of that burden of now who's going to pay the property taxes for this property, for this land. And it just makes this so much easier. All right, land asset compilation. So this ties in with what I was just saying. And this is pretty much like it's a basic estate plan. We'll just call it that, because you never know when something might happen to you. Um, I highly recommend, you have your estate planning needs in order by an authorized estate planning lawyer. Get that will, get whatever else type of estate planning needs you need set up. But I did want to put together a quick little access reference sheet. And you can look at it as kind of like a password book, which is really popular in the stores lately, where it's just like one little section book that has all of your passwords for all of your websites, your subscriptions, like everything you might need. That if something happened to you, your spouse or your kids would be able to log in and take care of the needs. Or a legacy box I've heard, where you have your mortgage statements, again, your passwords, any other important documents all in one place, as a quick access. So whoever you're leaving everything to, doesn't have to go scrambling around where did mom keep the title and the deed? Where did mom keep the cash assets? What bank accounts does she have? What retirement? But this is focused on your land. And this is also a PDF I'm going to get you. And Vic put it in the chat box. Thank you, Vic. So you can download that, and I would recommend using it. This does not replace any type of will or estate planning documentation. It's not going to hold up in court at all, but it's going to give a lot of clarity and hopefully reduce a lot of stress for your beneficiaries, for your spouses and your kids, that if something happened to you tomorrow, God forbid you got hit by a bus, they would kind of know a little bit about it a little bit. So at the top, name. If you have multiple tracks, you're going to want to name your tracks. Like, is that Hardy Road track? Is that the Longleaf Swamp track? If it's only one piece of property that you have, you don't have to necessarily give it a name, but share where the location is. Is it on John Smith Green Road? Or is it on Dairy Queen in South Carolina? So give it some type of geographical reference or a name, preferably both. That way, whoever's left behind to take care of things is going to know which track this is referring to and where it is. Acres and timber type, and again, this just gives them some information. If they've never been involved, especially with the management or the conversations for your land, they may not even know how many acres your family has. They may just say like, yeah, we have some land in Southwest Georgia. We have, I think, a few hundred acres, and a few hundred actually turn into 1,200. Or they say, yeah, I think we have like 50, and 50 was really 250. Because they may just simply not know. And then the timber type, and this again is just really general. Do you have ag fields, or is it pine plantations or hardwood? Some type of description that when they call the forester or the county forester or somebody to kind of help them filter through what to do with this land, they can talk a little bit more intelligently and say, hey, we have 75 acres off of Smith Road that is pine plantation and some hardwood. That's a huge help. And so we have, I think, 70-ish acres somewhere over there. It's just really going to help them kind of get started. Access, huge. What are the road access points? So what road leads to your property if it's not off a major county road? Are there any easements? Like, are you landlocked and you have to cross a neighbor's property? What neighbor is that that you have to cross? What was the easement agreement with that neighbor? Is there any easement documentation that they might need to know about, especially if maybe there are some disputes with that easement? Or what is the contact information for that neighbor if they have to reach them? Are there any gates and lock combinations on the property? If they cross through that property and they come to your entrance and all of a sudden there's a gate with 3 different locks on it because you have a hunting club, what is at least one of the combinations for them to get into? Hang on one second. My mom is fixing to come through the door, so I'm just going to text her the garage code. Next, title and deed location. So where are these located? they might be near where your mortgage is at, or I don't know, you might put it somewhere differently. Maybe it's in a safety deposit box. Maybe it's in that safe in your closet. Maybe it's in a binder on the left side of the bookcase. Where can they find this information to show proof of ownership, especially if they're going to have to get that information changed over into their name or into an estate's trust, LLC, or whatever it may be. Who will be responsible for decisions? Please make sure it's backed up by a formal will and estate planning documentations. But again, for quick access, you can be like, hey, George is going to take care of all this. And then you just want to make sure in your will and estate planning needs, you label George, as authorized to make management decisions or decisions on your behalf for the land property. But this might be just like a quick way that if, say, Susie finds the paperwork first and she says, oh, George is going to take care of all the land stuff, she can hand this to him and he can kind of start moving forward, hopefully. Short-term active contracts. So this might be if you have any leases on your property. Think of pine straw leases, honeybee leases, hunting leases. Maybe you do have some easements like egress for a logging company or timber company to cross your property to do their timber sale and move logs off of it. What type of short-term active contracts are related to your property, to your land? And what years are they active on there? So it doesn't matter necessarily if you say, well, it started in 1990, but you can say this is active for until 2024. Don't necessarily put 2 years, because 2 years, if this was written 5 years ago and they don't know when this is written, it may or may not expire. So kind of make sure you're putting years around those parameters. And so again, something happens to you, they kind of know what these different activities or income stream opportunities are happening on your property. And same as short term, you want long-term active contracts. Now, I am emphasizing active because if it's already expired, I don't think it necessarily matters for what we're talking about for this documentation here. But long-term contracts. So maybe you have a 5-year contract with your pine straw company, or maybe you have a 5-year, 10-year contract with the hunting clubs. You want to make sure those are put in there and that years those contracts are active. If it's a conservation easement, those can be 99 years plus forever. You want to make sure that's on there. And so whoever is taking over the property understands, hey, this land is underneath conservation use. We can't develop it. Like legally, you can't do that. Maybe you have carbon markets, and if you're in a carbon market program, there's a new one that's only a year long, but maybe you're in that 125-year long carbon market program. So again, what are those dates surrounding that? If you have cell phone tower leases out there, that's going to be a long-term contract. So those things aren't easy to take down. Solar panels, just anything that is associated with your property, and contractory, especially legally binding. This would be a great place for you to kind of put all that information in the years they are active, and that will help a ton. You won't even know. Important structures located on site. So if you have any historical structures such as a shed, house, home site, log cabin, cemetery, anything that's out there that needs to be protected that they may or may not know about, you want to make sure you list that out there. Pole barns, fences, and then what other important information might be applicable that would help them make management decisions, especially in the short term for your property. And then there's a nice little table that has like important names and contacts. So this would be if you have a consultant forester, you would put his name and maybe cell phone and email address. Maybe that neighbor you have the ingress and egress easement with, you put their name and contact information. Maybe you have cost share programs that you enrolled in. You put the NRCS name and contact information. Maybe it's just the other lease contact information, the hunting and lease club, head guy, who you do all your talking with, you put his name and information. So this is really it's a 1-page sheet that really helps if something was to happen to you tomorrow, your spouse or kids kind of pick up and move and know what's going on with property and be able to help make those decisions. So the 5 things you need to do this year to help you succeed in your land management. 1, remember, review your plan, determine what needs to be done, what is a priority, get a plan if you don't have a plan. 2, get your farm records established. Get a relationship with your NRCS office. 3, get yourself some good field boots, waterproof. Remember that. 4, property tax reduction. So if you're not enrolled into some conservation use program for your property, go to the tax assessors, figure out which one's best for you, talk to a tax accountant, especially if you have those larger acreages, to determine what might be a better fit for you, and enroll in some type of property conservation use program. And 5, fill out this quick little sheet and put it somewhere safe that's easy to be found with all the other documentations, because you can't really pick up your land and put it in a nice little safety deposit box, but you can take this sheet and put it with all the other important documents that if for your affairs and estate planning needs. So that being said, if all of this was helpful for you and you liked kind of my style of teaching, especially, what we have coming up is called the Women Landowner Academy. Now, I think several of y'all on here, let me check, that participated in it last year. And some of y'all are actually already enrolled in it as my early birds. But if you're not, the Women Landowner Academy is going to help provide you all of your landowner foundations. Basically, it is going to get you to confidently manage a sustainable income producing forest in 6 weeks to meet your goals without feeling intimidated and making the wrong decisions. So what could you expect from that? It's a 6-week online program specifically designed for women in the Southeast. Now, if you don't live in the Southeast and you own land in the Southeast, you're still a great fit. If you don't live in the Southeast and your land's not in the Southeast, you might not be the best fit for this program. You can still enroll because landowner responsibilities are pretty universal, but the land management topics that we are going to be focusing on are specific to Southeastern typical management regimes. So we meet weekly on live group sessions. So just like this, we would meet every Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. and we go through each chapter session of a printed workbook that you are provided. So each chapter provides a different landowner foundation for you to cover. And we meet, we have the discussion. A little half of it is about educational, kind of like what I did here. The second half is open discussion where I really get your questions, address your challenges, and try to answer those for you. You will have exclusive members portal. So I just switched to a new online platform where you're going to be able to access all the recordings, all the past recordings, all these extra exclusive Academy resources that complement pretty much anything you might need to be a successful landowner, a confident landowner. There is a private Facebook group where I do random private Facebook Lives pop-ups, but it's really a tool that's used to build and network with each other. So it's y'all can kind of jump in, ask questions, throw out challenges, share your celebrations, share your wins, your small wins, your big wins, and we can kind of cheer with you. And you're building that network camaraderie. There is also certification for it. So at the end of the 6 weeks, if you go through it, you'll receive the Warnell Master Forest Landowner Certificate. And this year, I changed it slightly. You will be receiving lifetime access to all of these materials, which means that you go through this and say next year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, you're like, you know what, I need a refresher. I've kind of let my land be on the back burner again. You can go back and watch all of the materials again, and you can jump in on the new live group sessions. So if you wanted to jump in on the new Academy members sessions, it's going to be the same topics, but open discussion always changes based on who's actually participating. And so you're going to be able to access all of these materials for the rest of my life, we'll call it. But enrollment starts tomorrow. So you can't enroll today. I want y'all to sit on it, think on it, pray on it. And registration will officially start tomorrow. So I will send that registration link to y'all tomorrow. And it will only be open until Friday because we start the academy officially next week on January 10th, with our first live session being January 11th. So if you want to be able to jump in on this, you only have this week to be able to do so. All right, that being said, I'm going to stop sharing and see what questions y'all might have now that I can see the chat box. So Donna had shared, and hopefully y'all read it, that it looks like the Forestry Commission and other extension and public agencies are always free of charge as well in Alabama. So that's great to know. Um, so does anyone have any questions on the 5 steps to be a successful landowner that I can address today, or questions on the academy?
I have a question. So
Yes.
say you have the conservation use for the taxes. How, since I've been here to this, how do I know if it's in place now, how much longer I have on that 10-year period?
So you should be able to go to your tax assessors and kind of ask when it started, and then you would, subtract 10 from that. And they should be able to give you that information.
So if I call them, they should be able to tell me how long it's in place.
They should, and if they can't say how long it's in place, ask when it started.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, in the chat box, if you register for CUBA and it ends at the 10-year mark, are you liable for back taxes if you don't renew? No. So if you choose not to renew, you're good to go. It's only for that 10-year period. You don't have to do back taxes. It's not like a catch-22, like, hey, I got you in here, but now you have to renew every 10 years for the rest of your life. You're only liable for back taxes if you break that covenant within that 10-year time period. So in the academy as well, there is a section on pretty much like financials, everything financial you need to know as a landowner, from understanding your budgets to cost share and other financial opportunities, how to reduce the cost burden for landowners, and a section on taxes. And I believe it's in chapter 3. It might be chapter 5. I think it's chapter 3. And I have actually a tax expert that comes and talks to y'all about all the different types of taxes you need to be aware of. She is a tax expert for Georgia, so she can only specifically talk about Georgia taxes. But since the southeastern states are so similar, it's information you can easily pull and find your state tax expert and make sure things are still apples to apples. So any other questions? All right. Well, not reading any, not seeing any. If you haven't joined the Facebook group that's becoming a landowner in 2022, you can go ahead and join that. I'm going to be uploading all the resources to there as well, but I'll be emailing them directly to you. You'll get a copy of this recording as well as soon as it finishes downloading, and a copy of the PDF of my presentation and all the PDFs of those resources I showed with you. And the links, so all the links that we shared about the how to find your FSA and NRCS office, the timber taxes, those links to some boot examples if you wanted to know like those about. I'm going to share all of that with you after the fact. You should be getting those probably tomorrow. It takes about a day for these downloads to come to me and upload to a suitable platform. But I do want to thank y'all for your time. Hopefully this was really, really valuable and you'll be taking some steps for your property. And if not tomorrow, this week or next week. And I would love to hear back from y'all as you're implementing these. Whenever you do something, I would love to celebrate with y'all. Just shoot me an email. I'll put that in the chat box if you don't know what it is, landandladies@gmail.com. And I would just love to see how you're progressing in your land management responsibilities and cheer you on from afar. All right, well, I hope y'all have a great Sunday. Have a great Sunday, y'all. Bye.